What's up, guys? Today we're going to be doing some analysis and some comparison between PayPal stock and Block stock. So these are both two stocks that I own. I bought both of these last year, I believe, and now looking back, it's obvious that I bought them not at the best prices, but PayPal I bought at $183 a share, and Block I bought at $141 a share. So although I bought too early, I do believe it will get back to those prices. I'm just going to have to wait a while. So if we compare both of these companies, we can see that PayPal is much bigger. PayPal is a $102 billion company, and Square is a $41 billion company. Now, Square or Block, whatever you want to call it, they own the Square brand that makes hardware and software. They also own the Cash App. And so they do a lot. Both companies do a lot of similar things. They're a payment platform, and then they also deal with like crypto and stock trading. So they do a lot of similar business operations. But if we compare some of the stats here, we can see that for the share change, for example, Square increased its number of shares by 18% this year, while PayPal increased or decreased their share count by 2.5%. And down here, I put PayPal bought back $3.2 billion worth of stock just this year so far, which is a huge amount. That's going to add, a lot of confidence to the investor base out there, and it just makes the company look more confident in what they're doing. If we look at the number of users, this was tough for me because I found so many different numbers. Both companies own multiple different brands or different apps, and so it's kind of hard to tell. And even when I looked at Square's investor presentation, it was kind of hard to tell because the way they define certain things is confusing. So like I saw one number that said Square has 80 million users, right? But I think that's for an annual basis. I think that's for total number of users all in all. And then I think for a monthly active users, it's about 49 million or maybe 50 million, somewhere around there. But again, it's hard to tell. PayPal, they have 429 million users. That's across all platforms. And then Venmo has 90 million. Okay, so PayPal is much bigger. They have a lot more users. They have a much bigger market cap, and they do a lot more in revenue. If we look at their price to sales, both companies are trading at much lower than where they normally are trading. Square's at a 2.1 and PayPal's at a 3.4. Their average price to sales is Square normally trades at a 6 and PayPal normally trades at a 7. So definitely cheaper than usual. Their profit margins, Square has trouble reporting a profit. Their average margin is -3%. And if we look at it, they have had profitable quarters, but I don't know if they've had a profitable year yet. So because Square is a company that's a faster growing company, they're a little bit newer, and PayPal's a little bit older and more established. So if we look at their revenue here, we can see, so let's see, negative. So maybe they haven't even had, we'll see, they put up positive numbers. I think, let's see, what does it say their profit margin is here? So -3%. Yeah, that's what we're at right now. Not the best. PayPal's profit margin is 13%. Once again, more established, and they're not growing as fast, so they have better margins. And then we have revenue growth this year, this is kind of different. Square is actually expected to have -1% revenue growth, and then PayPal is expected to grow by 9%, which is kind of surprising considering the different positions of these companies. The return on invested capital for Square is 0, of course, and PayPal is 13%, which is pretty good. And then when we look at their balance sheet, Square has a slightly better balance sheet. Also, that's also a surprising thing. I mean, I think a lot of it's probably because of their Bitcoin investment that's on there. That probably added tens of millions of dollars to their balance sheet. But their ratio is 2.4 assets for every 1 liability, and then PayPal's is 1.4 to 1. So both are good enough. But the difference here, what I wanted to point out was PayPal also has $10 million in cash. Or I'm sorry, no, way more than that. 10 billion in cash, but on their investor presentation, they claim they had 17 billion in like cash and investments, and not current assets, but just cash and investments. They said 17 billion, but the balance sheet says 10 billion in cash. So why that is important is because that means that a company as big as PayPal with that much money, that means that gives them a lot of flexibility and a lot of options to buy out other companies. And once other companies like PayPal get really big and they start getting into the hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap, then a lot of times by the time they get so big, they don't grow as fast. Maybe they're only growing 3% a year or something, or 5% a year. They're going to acquire other companies, smaller companies that are faster growing, and that's going to add to their business model and keep them, innovating, right? So that's something I can see PayPal doing, and that's what makes them interesting. Is yes, they're not growing as fast, which is, I mean, they grew a lot more than Square this year, but part of that could probably be because of Bitcoin too, because Bitcoin has been so volatile the last year, and that I think that messed with Square's numbers a lot because they have to report that in their earnings. But the bottom line is PayPal has all that cash, and that gives them a lot of options to buy out other companies. The other thing to compare here is where their apps rank in the App Store. Cash App is number 1 actually, which is kind of surprising. And they're the number 1 finance app, and they're also the 8th most downloaded app in the United States. Now, they also pointed out in their investor presentation that their average cost to add a new Cash App user is $10. And when you compare this to the normal bank like a JP Morgan or Bank of America, those numbers are between $300 to $500 for a bank to add a new person, because those banks are always giving out bonuses a lot of times and giving people more incentives. Cash App has not had to do that. So I thought that was interesting too. As for Venmo, I believe Venmo is Venmo or PayPal. Yeah. So Cash App's number 1. I believe number 2 and number 3 is PayPal and Venmo. That's another thing to point out. Venmo is one of those companies, just like how I said, PayPal bought them out a couple of years ago, and that's added a lot of growth to their company, right? It's brought on more users, and it's hopefully going to be a big cash making part of their business at some point in the future, but we will see. The other thing I want to point out here is this is a Block earnings breakdown. We can see that they have had pretty nice growth here. If we look back in 2016 and 2017, their biggest segments are the transactions and then the subscriptions and the services, right? So the weird thing here though is if you look at the last 2 years, this red is the Bitcoin. So they made a lot of money. They made $10 billion off of Bitcoin in 2021, and then they made 4.5 billion in revenue. So because remember, Square was investing in Bitcoin when it was under 20,000, and I think now it's under 20,000 too, but back then that was before it went up to 60,000. And I think they sold some around 40,000 or 50,000. So I think they made, like $20 million or $30 million. And then we can look at other things here, like where they're making their money from. Again, the transactions is a big one, but the subscriptions and the services is also a big one. Bitcoin was, so the total is 12.3 billion for 2021, just for Cash App revenue. And the majority of that, 80% of that was Bitcoin. And then subscriptions and services was 2 billion and transactions was $500 million. So that's interesting too. If we look at PayPal, we can see here that for how big of a company PayPal is, they're still doing a good job growing. I believe they also own, see up here, I have this extension called Honey. That Honey extension for the browsers, I believe they own that as well. So there's a couple companies that PayPal already owns. The other argument you could bring up here is that PayPal talks about this. See, they go more in depth, but they say PayPal is working with Apple to enhance offerings for PayPal and Venmo merchants and consumers. So it sounds like what you're going to be able to do is just like how you go to a store, you could pay with things, you could pay with Apple Pay and it just scans your phone. You're going to be able to do that with PayPal and Venmo, and you can also have like a debit card to pay with. And let's see, the other thing that they're doing is they're saying by the end of this year, by Christmas time, when you go on Amazon to buy something, you should be able to use your Venmo account actually to purchase, which is interesting. But my point is that it's kind of weird because let's say 10 years ago, PayPal was something that was more important of a service, right? But nowadays, there's so many companies, you know, the e-commerce companies, and there's so many different platform companies that offer what they do. It's not really some innovative technology anymore to be a payment company, right? To allow, you know, to allow those transactions. So I don't really see what, you know, why are they working with Apple or Amazon? Because if you can just use Apple Pay, right? Or you can, let's say you go on eBay or Shopify to buy something, they have payment platforms already built into them. Or, you know, let's say JP Morgan Chase, for example, there's a lot of different ways to transfer that money. But one thing I guess that makes PayPal stick out is they are supposed to be the ones who ensure the safety and the security of the users on the platform. So that is where they come in. That's what's important for them. But it definitely is a concern to me, something I want to keep my eye on, and I want to make sure that PayPal is innovating if I'm going to keep all those shares that I own. Block is a little bit different because Block is, you know, they have Jack Dorsey, and they're a little bit more innovative of a company, I feel. So, you know, they're involved with crypto more and stuff. I feel like I'm not as worried about them growing, but PayPal, I could be worried. I just want to keep an eye on, are they making acquisitions? Are they doing things to keep the company growing? That's what I'm going to be watching in 2023. But I think that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.